I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Stephanie Gripne. Steph is actually one of our hometown heroes on impact investing, as she spent much of her life here growing up, as well as in Colorado, where she is now. She's the CEO of the Impact Finance Center there. She is an investor educator. She's a creative force. Her goal is to help move $1 trillion into impact investing through multiple leverage points, including Colorado Impact Days, where she helps connect investors to direct investments to benefit Colorado. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steph. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me here. Thank you. It's always an honor to come back. This is only the second time I've gotten to speak in my hometown, other than being salutatorian back in 1992 in Wood River High School. So, Teresa Ish, program officer for the Walton Family Foundation. She calls me about 6 months ago and she says, Stephanie, you gotta teach me this impact investing thing. And I said, okay. I said, just to be clear, Teresa, our toolbox is growing. We have over 40 tools in the toolbox. So we have tools on your endowment or investment portfolio. We have tools on your philanthropy. We have tools in your direct investing. So are you discussing governance, investment beliefs, decision-based attribution evaluation? Because in the Pacific Northwest, we just identified a $100 million foundation spent an extra $1 million in fees over 5 years to lose $5 million. We just helped the AJL Charitable Foundation in Denver understand that they spent an extra $400,000 in fees to lose $750,000 over 10 years. So are you talking about those tools? Or are you talking about manager diversity, shareholder action, your philanthropic assessment? Or would you like to learn about direct investing? And she said, let's start with direct investing. And so she created our Impact Finance Center Fellowship, where we identify, educate, and activate philanthropists and investors who want to become impact investors. And I'm happy to report on her 5th coaching session of 10 sessions, she got the first direct investment approved out of the Walton Family Foundation in the environment program. It was a negative 50% return investment into a for-profit sustainable seafood company. Did everyone hear me correctly? A negative 50% return investment into a for-profit sustainable seafood company. And if you ask Teresa or me and say, is that a concessionary? Is that a above market rate, or below market rate investment? You know what we would say? It's an above market rate investment. Why? Because most people don't realize your philanthropy, whether you do it through your gifts, your grants, your donor advised fund distributions, that's a negative 100% return investment, attempting positive impact. And so a negative 50% return investment means she's going to get a 50% return on her money plus the tax deduction. So it's a 5x return. I'd actually say it's an above market rate investment. That transaction illustrates full spectrum aligned catalytic capital. What happens when we use all of our money and look at investments from our negative 100% philanthropy? Philanthropy is an investment attempting positive impact with a negative 100% financial return, and all of our investments have impact. So I'm Dr. Stephanie Gripne. I lead the Impact Finance Center. We are a nonprofit providing non-conflicted investor education. And what does that mean? Some of the people in the audience come up to me afterwards and they say, Stephanie, I don't get it. I don't get the math. It's too complicated. And I said, no offense. I grew up in a small town in Idaho and I studied wildlife and forestry. If I can understand this, you can understand this. So I say that, number one. And number two, I say, listen, it's not that different than 100 years ago. We actually made it complex. 100 years ago, if we were in the valley, you'd be the sheep rancher. I'd be at the Atkinsons. You'd have to keep your sheep up in the high country because the grass was so great, and you'd come to me and say, can I have an extension on my credit at Atkinson's? And I'd say, of course, my family's known your family for years, and I'd give you an extension. I would argue that 85% of that transaction was positive and beautiful and good. You and I investing in one another. But 15% of that transaction was problematic. We had issues of risk, geographic risk, sector risk, and diversity risk. Instead of solving the 15% that was wrong, we threw out the whole transaction, and now we're in Wall Street, where we don't know where our money's going. We're not looking each other in the eye. And so Mainstreet 2.0 vision is our vision to bring that money back to Main Street, but use Wall Street to price risk and create safety net product. So how does that work? About a year ago, I was running my first half marathon in Duluth, Minnesota. It ends at Grandma's Bar. It's called the Grandma's Marathon. And my college roommate said to me, Steph, can you talk to our mayor who's now running a $35 million foundation, the Ordean Foundation? I say, absolutely. So we hobble up after the half marathon to the bar, and we meet Don Ness. And he is a beloved mayor of Minnesota, of Duluth, Minnesota. And he's like, Stephanie, I know how to be mayor of Duluth, Minnesota, but I don't know how to run a private family foundation. I said, tell me about it. He's like, we got 35 million. About 1.3 million goes out in grants, pretty much to the same nonprofits who are doing excellent work for the same 10 years. I'm like, where's your money invested? He's like, a big bank, I'm not going to name, who's using it to invest things counter-mission to the Ordean Foundation's values, which are human services in Duluth. And I said, Don, here's the deal. If you work with us, we have 40 plus tools in the toolbox. We can get at least 20 of your 35 million invested directly back into Duluth, Minnesota within 5 years. And we can give you the same, if not better, financial return, risk, liquidity, except now you're positively supporting Duluth. We can make sure the other 10 million isn't harming Duluth. But what we really want to do is go on an adventure with you to find the other 100, 200, 300 individuals and organizations that have over a couple $1 million and take them through identification, education, and activation. Teach them our investor education so that they can invest into Duluth, Minnesota. And then, Don, we're going to have to take a little bit of your grant dollars, and we're going to have to recreate community banking as we know it. Consumer product, small business product, nonprofit product. Let's create a 0% student loan program. Let's create an alternative payday lending program. Let's create a nonprofit grant advance facility. So if my grant's coming in October, I can turn it into an entity and get access to it right now for cash flow. Let's create a tool we have in Colorado called the Mainstreet Character Loan Program, where anybody with a good idea for a small business can go borrow up to $50,000 with a good idea, good character, and bad or no credit. 103% return plus a tax deduction if you're following my math. And then, Don, we're going to take some of your grant dollars and we're going to have to grow investor clubs. We're going to start with an impact investing giving circle for Duluth and a Duluth community note and a Duluth investor club. And then we're going to open it up for non-accredited investors, low middle income people. And we don't want my great Aunt Jan taking her last money out of our IRA outside of Minneapolis, investing it into Duluth without ensuring she's going to get the same, if not better, financial return, risk, and liquidity, and now positive impact. And we can do that by taking the best tools of Wall Street and bringing them back down to Mainstreet. So Don, if you work with us, we can take your $35 million foundation and over 10 to 15 years, turn it into $500 million of investment into Duluth, Minnesota. And that's what we call Mainstreet 2.0. Thank you so much for having me.